Now we're into the first half of the 2010s, 2010 through 2014, and we begin what was, for a while, the last year to have 10 Best Picture nominees until 11 years later for the films of 2021. So we begin with 2010, and we start this up with Black Swan by Darren Aronofsky, which was, I believe, the first horror film of the century so far, and only one of the three horror films to do so to receive the Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. And I am putting this one in C. Here's my take on the film. Now, I'm very kind of hit or miss with Darren Aronofsky because I still had no idea what on earth that Requiem for a Dream was when I was watching it. It was absolutely like I would probably even talk more about that. The Whale, that was a movie that was not great, but fantastic acting though. And The Wrestler was probably my favorite one I've seen from out of the four I've seen. But Black Swan, I think it's just okay. I think the horror aspect really worked well, but that only occurs in the second half of the movie. After the infamous supposed lesbian sex scene, which I know both Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis said they both regretted doing that scene. Um, yeah, that's when the horror aspect really comes into play. So it's like it kind of acts more like a thriller in the first half, and then truly horror in the second half. I think all the horror aspect that was missing in the first act, if that was, I think I would have loved this movie. Portman, I would say she's a fine one here. I think between that or Jackie, I don't know which one would be the best nomination for her. Easily, obviously, Closer is the weakest one. Her first nomination. Um, yeah, it's just like the whole climax was fantastic. It's just that first half. It's just like how I don't know. It's like there's some weird moments, like how Barbara Hershey has her, as Portman's mother, at basically having almost thinking that she's still a child when she's still basically an adult. The odd relationship between what she has with her and Mila Kunis's character. It just seems odd to me. I mean, I would go back for the massive climax, for the massive dance of the Swan Lake, but it's just that first half is just so, like, there's just nothing until when it really gets suspense once we get into the infamous, controversial lesbian sex scene, I would say. For my personal vote that year for Best Actress, although Portman did kind of swept, my personal vote would have been for Nicole Kidman in Rabbit Hole. Next up, The Fighter, which beginning of what I would say the David O. Russell trilogy of for the Oscars, I would say. Are these all? No, not all of these are biopics. I almost thought Silver Linings Playbook's not a biopic. But obviously this one is, of course, won both the supporting categories for both Christian Bale and Melissa Leo. I'm gonna put this one in D. I mean, the concept definitely seems very interesting of the story of Mickey Eklund, I believe, and like the struggling life he was having at the time with not just the relationship with his brother Dickie, but also with his mother and then his ex-wife, trying to get a massive connection with the daughter, like his daughter specifically, and obviously with this bartender, which is Amy Adams' character. It's just like there's just so much relationships that Mickey has to deal with. It kind of is the massive gripe, I would say. If they just specifically had the relationship just between Mickey and Dickie, which Mickey is Mark Wahlberg and Dickie is Christian Bale, I think it probably would have worked better. If it was just about the two brothers, I think that would have been a fantastic. Although that kind of is a major aspect of the plot, but I think just the boxing scenes are just probably the only things I would go back to. Just nothing else like the violence. I mean, yeah, there was that one police officer, I believe, that just crushed Mickey's hand out of no reason when Dickie obviously was causing a lot of trouble. So, yeah. And Mickey's ex-wife, I know, like, I don't know how she would be in real life, but in the movie they did portray her like an absolute jerk. Um, especially in the one phone call scene she has with Mickey when she was showing her daughter her brother's Dickie's documentary. So, yeah. So I've not even seen the Dickie documentary, I believe, that was aired on television, I believe. But, man, there's just nothing really fond with me about this. So yeah, I just don't think the supporting ones were not necessary. Yeah, I'll get into what I would have chosen here in about a few minutes. Now we come into Christopher Nolan's Inception. Many people are still happy it got in Best Picture. It got 4 wins for the sound categories, visual effects, and cinematography, but people were pissed that the movie did not get in for film editing, and especially not for director for Christopher Nolan, which many people consider to be the biggest snub of that year, with Nolan not getting in for director. Even though he was not in the contention for the win, but almost like diehard Nolan fans almost feel like he should be. And although I definitely would have put him in there regardless. So yeah, I'm putting this one in. Trying to think here. I'm gonna put this one in. Yeah, I'm gonna put this in. Okay, I have to really think about this because um, there are some good performances in the movie. I really do like the whole time structure of it. Um, would it be my personal? Yeah, it would have been my. Yeah, no one. No, I'm not very sure. I think it's a toss up between that or original screenplay winner in another year for my pick for original screenplay. I have to. I don't have my personal lineup on me. Well, yeah, I know what my winner was in that year, and that's not even here. That's a documentary. Um, Obviously, like the whole time structure, the editing was really great. It's just I think Cotillard's character was kind of very unnecessary. Like DiCaprio's character doesn't really do much. Like, although he's like the main, like the standout performance in the movie was obviously then Ellen Page. So yeah, then that person when he was a she was the standout of the cast for me personally. Joseph Gordon-Levitt had fun with his entire obviously big battle action scene. I believe he had to do, of course. Um, I think just because since a lot of the characters are not that memorable, although the story really works so well and the direction is amazing, I might have to put this in B just because of the performances. It's just the characters are just something that doesn't really bring something like that's kind of something with my massive gripe when it comes to some of Nolan's movies. It's just with the exception I would say of the Dark Knight trilogy. All of his other movies, even Oppenheimer, some of the characters are just not really that memorable, and that could be just basically in some of the performances. I don't know how the Odyssey will do, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, I wanted to put this in A, but since a lot of the characters are not really that memorable by their performances, I have to put this in B. Now we come into The Kids Are Alright by Alicia Cholandenko. I am gonna put this one in. Yeah, yeah, since it kind of. Um, yeah, I think like, it did kind of piss me off, but yeah, I'm gonna have to put this in our first F tier. I'm not saying it's a terrible movie, but it did kind of pissed me off. Um, I think it's just that I think it's regarding Annette Bening's character, where she is kind of almost like the jealous one. Obviously, when the kids are finally meeting their birth father, who he obviously was the sperm donor for both of their lesbian mothers, which of course are Annette Bening and Julianne Moore. And then when their sperm father, which is Mark Ruffalo's character, comes in and meets them, and then has this somewhat relationship with Julianne Moore's character, and Bening kind of gets jealous. And I think that kind of really just kind of makes, with some of the characters not being unlikable, especially with Benning's character, just kind of pissed me off a bit. It would be like a very, not up F tier, but a very almost closing into the E tier. Like I would say F plus tier, I would say, but that's not really a good thing point to say it. But it would be almost like I would say like almost close to like around the bottom 30s, I would say, or like a 3 or a 4 out of 10, I would say. So it probably more likely for a 4 out of 10, I would say. Yeah, it just yeah, kind of didn't really go for me. I didn't really think this like it just like the story seemed very interesting, but then was just like, oh, the sperm father almost wanted to make love with one of the mothers, and then the one gets really jealous. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but yeah, this is kind of I would say the first movie on here that did kind of pissed me off. Now we're into our Best Picture winner, The King's Speech by Tom Hooper. And let's just say this right now, this movie does not deserve the hate. I know why people are hating on this movie's win, because not only could it be what is many people consider the best film of the year, but of course of Harvey Weinstein's cheating campaign strategy he did. But yeah, I really do like this movie. Um, I'm gonna put this one in B as well. The thing about it is, like, yeah, the story really seemed interesting at just okay, not really much of the story, but the performances by Colin Firth, Helena Bonham Carter, and Jeffrey Rush, all three of them just really makes those three characters really likable, and just seeing the struggling of the real life scenario of a king with a stuttering issue. And it kind of just shows, like, with speech therapy and how it went back then, especially with an Australian theater actor doing the therapy in the UK and just getting this King George guy just to make. Well, he was then Prince and then officially became king, of just all the strategy he had to do. I'm gonna get some hot takes on this one, but I honestly agree with the Academy on the Best Director win. Tom Hooper would have been my choice for Best Director. I think he deserved it. Helena Bonham Carter and Jeffrey Rush would have been my personal picks in the supporting categories, respectively. For Best Actor for Colin Firth, he is on the edge, but we'll get into, no pun intended on that one, but you'll see who would have been my personal pick for Best Actor, and it just, obviously you can tell who it would be. Um, yeah, and obviously the speech scene, definitely one of the best movie scenes. Probably one of the best, like, I don't know if it's just with Firth's acting, but also with the score by Alexander Desplat and the direction by Tom Hooper. It's like, you understand why they did that speech in that little mini Best Picture montage when the category was presented. Because, yeah, that speech basically, you can tell why it won Best Picture just mainly because of that scene alone, or why Colin Firth won Best Actor. But yeah, I really do like this movie a lot more than a lot of people do. Yeah, I don't mind its Best Picture win, so I'm on the minority on this one. Now we come into what would be my pick for Best Picture, 127 Hours by Danny Boyle, and this is going in A tier. Basically of telling, like, obviously this is a real life story, of course, on Aaron Ralston, on the man who spent that exact number of hours in that like part of a canyon with his boulder stuck into his right arm. That unfortunately had to cut it out to save his own life. And yeah, but just basically, like, James Franco just basically takes the entire spotlight of the movie with Danny Boyle's direction. It's just that him recreating all the video scenes in Aaron Ralston's video camera that him and the crew actually saw in order to recreate it. Obviously, the real life footages are not going to be released, but they're the closest things we would get to the real life Aaron Ralston footage of a lot of his videotapes. Except I think there's only one videotape footage from Ralston of just like saying he's introducing himself to the camera, and that's basically it. But James Franco, despite of the controversy he would have years later, and ironically he hosted this year's ceremony with Anne Hathaway, he would have been my pick for Best Actor. It would have been my pick for Adapted Screenplay, and it would have been my pick for Best Picture. So, yeah, Slumdog Millionaire and 127 Hours. Two great back-to-back movies from Danny Boyle, I will say. So, although Slumdog almost got in, would have been my Best Picture pick if it wasn't for Benjamin Button, but 127 Hours would kind of make it up for it. Now we come into everyone's favorite film of 2010, and what many people consider the best film from David Fincher, The Social Network. And oddly enough, there was a sequel that had just been announced, with Aaron Sorkin taking both the writing and directing stage this time after he only wrote the first film. Well, I'm not sure if I'm gonna really look forward to the sequel or not, because I don't know if no one asked for it. But also, I just honestly really felt bored with this movie. Yes, that's right. I felt bored with this movie, and I'm gonna put this. I'm actually gonna. Yeah, I have to put this in E. I was almost gonna put it in D, but I just got really bored with this movie. The only good things about the movie are just the cinematography and the performances by Andrew Garfield and Armie Hammer. The latter of which also is another controversial person that would get some sexual controversies, like James Franco. So, and Armie Hammer had to play two characters. I think it's just either with Fincher's direction or Sorkin's writing, because when I would later see Sorkin's all three of his movies that he has directed so far, I think it could be the reason I wasn't big on The Social Network. I not because of his dialogue, but maybe both the performances and David Fincher's direction. I just like it's just like and the editing was just like absolute boredom. I wouldn't say it's like a cold movie cuz I didn't feel cold watching it. I just like yeah, the concept seemed interesting of like the invention of Facebook, but with all the plots going on with the relationship that Mark would have with some of his college roommates, the lawsuits he was going on for both the twins and with Garfield's character and the whole issues with Timberlake's character. Yeah, Justin Timberlake acted a bit throughout the early 2010s while taking a break on his music. It's just, yeah, I know a lot of people are not going to like that, me putting it in E. It's just that it's an absolute bore fest of a movie. Although Garfield and Hammer, as I said, are the only decent performances in the movie, and maybe the cinematography, but it's just Fincher's direction probably why I didn't really care for the movie as much. If Sorkin did directed the movie, I think I might have would have liked it a lot better. And now into the third and what is so far the last animated film because the Academy, or should I say I was originally saying the hierarchies of the Academy, but after reading a book called Bright and Shining, which is kind of like an encyclopedia on the animation's history at award shows, and I'm guessing it might be a lot of actors that might be discriminating animation, as evident when Beauty and the Beast got nominated for Best Picture, when a lot of actors were heckling the film when they were presenting at the Oscars when it got nominated. So, well, right now that was evident in Volume 1, and I already have Volume 2. Volume 3, don't know when that will be out soon, but hopefully I'll get to read that. But yeah, Toy Story 3 is so far, the last animated film so far to receive a Best Picture nomination, and the latest one to date, which is very ridiculous when you look at some of the other Best Picture nominees that I don't think were not deserving to be in there, especially one when we'll get into it. Yeah, I obviously this one has really meant a lot to me with Toy Story 3 because I actually did got to watch it in theaters when it came out, and it was a great experience watching it on the big screen. Like seeing like the Sunnyside daycare, the dumpster, the ending, of course, and my probably big experience was not expecting Lotso Huggenbear to be a villain in the film. Like some people think, oh, it's another twist villain, but he was very straightforward because it's just because he gets an entire backstory, of course, that why he's evil in a lot of scenes with him, and that's due to the credit of Ned Beatty's performance and the writing, which the writer of this was Michael Arndt, who just wrote Little Miss Sunshine not that long ago. And obviously, this was Lee Unkrich's directorial debut, since John Lasseter, another person who would get later Me Too'd, was busy directing Cars 2, and was also the chief creative officer for both Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios at the time. And Unkrich made his directorial debut with this after he had done co-directing experiences on Toy Story 2, Monsters Incorporated, and Finding Nemo. I will say, in recent years, I'm gonna get a little hot take. I think for me, out of the four Toy Story movies, I think it is my least favorite out of the four. That doesn't mean I hate the movie. It's just that I think when I revisited the movie now, I think the first act is kind of a bit slow. Obviously, when they're just kind of having the conversation of that Andy is finally grown up, and like in between when they're in Andy's house and when they arrive at Sunnyside, it just like it kind of does have a bit of a slow pacing to the matter. But once I would say once Woody gets to Bonnie's house for the first time and then finding out and when the big revealment of Lotso being a villain, which obviously I had that shocking experience because if you stated that when the movie came out in theaters, that would have been a spoiler for the entire movie. Wow. It was just yeah, that was an awesome experience of that shocking reveal to me, as I stated. Yeah, but once the true colors of Sunnyside come in when Lotso's villain is revealed, that's when the movie really paces up better. Especially the whole prison break status. Like it's, I would say it's definitely one of the more darker animated films of the 2010s. Like yeah, because when you look at the other Toy Story movies, obviously yeah, you have the first Toy Story about torturing. You have Toy Story 2. Kind of obviously the "When She Loved Me" segment from the movie obviously kind of makes the sense, and Toy Story 4 doesn't really have a dark moment. A lot of comedic moments, I would say. But Toy Story 3, I think, would be the darkest one because of the whole prison status, I would say. It's just that could be the reason why I think it's one of the more darker, modern animated, mainstream animated features. With that said, I am actually going to put this in B. I would have said A when I first saw it back in 2010, but because of the slow pacing in the first act, I have to give it a B. Now we're into the Coen Brothers' True Grit, a very forgetful movie. I didn't even see the first film adaptation that starred John Wayne either. I'm putting this in E. I just don't remember a lot of this movie. It's just like I think this is like at least with the Social Network was more of a bore fest. The True Grit is another bore fest, but I forget pretty much everything about the movie other than like this was the movie that got Haley Steinfeld into the mainstream status, and that's basically it. And it's just like other than what like some scenes that were like in the weird opening segment for Anne Hathaway and James Franco that they did in their search for Alec Baldwin. Like was Anne Hathaway doing some sort of Western accent when she's in that? That it's just not really something. I don't really. Uh, yeah, I don't remember much of this movie in general. And this would actually be the last time they really took well to the Coen brothers, because like I know they had a bid with Inside Llewyn Davis and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and with Joe Cohen on his own with The Tragedy of Macbeth, but they hadn't really went big on a Coen brothers movie for like Best Picture or directing or even an acting nomination in recent years. So yeah, Buster Scruggs was probably close since it got that out of nowhere adapted screenplay nomination. But yeah, as I stated, I've kind of been hit or miss with the Coen brothers. A lot of misses, I would say, with the Coen brothers, and you can tell that not just with me putting this in E, but also their other two films, No Country for Old Men and A Serious Man, on this list as well. And finally, we get into Winter's Bone by Deborah Granick, the movie that got Jennifer Lawrence into the spotlight. If she wouldn't got that Oscar nomination, I think she would have not been a mainstream actress as we knew in her now. But with her getting that Best Actress nomination, she would end up getting 3 more Oscar nominations and be a star in the Hunger Games series. And I'm putting this one in B as well. I mean, it is a very, really intense movie of this sister trying to make sure her siblings are really taken care of as they're both younger. I believe that's right, because I don't think she's not the mother, I would say. Of the whole situation that they're dealing with the house they were living in, and with all the characters around, like the people that specifically that are around her area, it's just so intense. It's just like the writing from Deborah Granick and Anne Rossellini is just really suspense. But Jennifer Lawrence's performance really captivates the movie, and I can see why the movie was recognized because of her, and ironically, the movie came along with it as well. So yeah, if it wasn't for Deborah Granick, we wouldn't have Jennifer Lawrence. So major credit to her on getting her into the mainstream spotlight. Kind of like how the Coen brothers did with Haley Steinfeld, though. But this one was more bigger, obviously, because Steinfeld was put in supporting for her lead performance, another category fraud, and I would not add, by the way. So yeah, if it was, yeah, Winter's Bone, definitely a little bit of suspense. Obviously, definitely her best Oscar nomination without a doubt out of her 4 nomination performances. She might get one maybe this upcoming season with Die My Love, but we'll have to see. She was maybe in the conversation a couple years with when we get into other films like Don't Look Up, and Causeway was also she was also pretty decent as well. So yeah, out of all of her nominations, I think, yeah, although she would not have been my pick for Best Actress, but definitely her best Oscar nomination. 2011, the year where we go from 10 to 9, and we begin this up obviously with our Best Picture winner of the year, and the last movie to win Best Picture under Harvey Weinstein's name, The Artist, by Michelle Hazanavicius, the first silent movie since Wings to win Best Picture. Although if you would count the last minute dialogue that was added in the ending of the movie, but it's primarily a silent film. Um, I know some people actually do hate this movie because of Weinstein's involvement, of course, as always. But this would be the last time one of his movies would get the Best Picture winning title. But I'm gonna be honest, I think this is a masterpiece, and yeah, I'm putting this in double S tier. Yes, our second film to go in that tier list, and our first of a few films from this decade to go into the double S tier, and this is definitely one of them. Um, wow. I mean, I had an amazing experience with this movie. I believe I saw this actually when it was up on YouTube for free with the ads, of course. And I was just glued to the screen throughout the entirety of the movie, even with the ads involvements. I mean, the pacing was fantastic, the cinematography was fantastic, the production design, the costumes, the technical aspect, the score by Ludovic Bors, definitely one of the best wins in the original score category. Michel Hazanavicius' direction, and the performances by Jean Dujardin, which he was fine, but and Bernice Bejo, wow, she was just so fantastic, and she's actually Hazanavicius' real life wife, by the way. It's just that movie was just a massive exploration of how we go from the silent era to almost like the beginning of the sound era, and like one star, rising star taking over a former star who had been in the power, but now his career was going downhill. It's just like it's almost something you have seen in a couple other movies, like Babylon, for an example, just in this decade. But this is definitely a great example of this because just doing it all with no dialogue is just fantastic. It definitely deserved the wins for original score, uh, um, and directing, and of course Best Picture. It would have been my pick for production design and cinematography as well. Costume design, I can't say because I had not seen Anonymous, Jane Eyre, or WE. Film editing, I definitely think it should have got in. It was just paced very well because with me just being stick to that screen, the editing just kept me glued to it, and I had a fantastic experience watching this. If many people would say, no, okay, then again, I've not seen The English Patient or Shakespeare in Love. But if you would say what would be the best Weinstein movie to win Best Picture of the 21st century, it's easily The Artist. Next up, we go into Hawaii with The Descendants by Alexander Payne, which did one for Best Adapted Screenplay. And I am putting this one in B. Obviously, this story is obviously the massive George Clooney's character having to not also deal with the loss of his wife, but also kind of finding out that she was cheating on him, and the almost like he was going through a bit of a crisis a bit. And now with the difficulty he has as now just a widow, and now trying to figure out did his wife actually who did his wife had made out with before she died or stuff like that a couple of times. Shailene Woodley really has fantastic. George Clooney is also great as well. He would have been my pick for Best Actor, and he had definitely a great year he had with that and directing The Ides of March. So yeah, Clooney did had a great 2011. He did, and he would have been my Best Actor pick over Jean Dujardin. Shailene Woodley definitely should have got in for Best Supporting Actress, although I'm not really sure she would have been in my personal lineup, but definitely would have been a great candidate. Yeah, so like this is another movie where, kind of like I mentioned with Winterspoon and True Grit, if it wasn't for The Descendants, we wouldn't have had Shailene Woodley. Granted, I know there are some movies that she wasn't in that a lot of people like the Divergent series, but then you had like The Spectacular Now. Some people like The Fault in Our Stars, and I know some people don't. And then you have the miniseries Big Little Lies as well, and now I believe she was on a Broadway stage on a play, I believe, a couple of months ago. So she's kind of around there, although not as big as like Steinfeld or Lawrence, but she is definitely kind of growing a bit as an older actress now, since she's now an adult as well as like Lawrence and Steinfeld as well. So going from a young age to now being a bit of a big actor in general. And now we come into by Stephen Daldry, produced by Scott Rudin, featuring actors like Tom Hanks, Sandra Bullock, Viola Davis, and Jeffrey Wright. I believe written by David Hare, and it's a fictional post 9/11 story about a young autistic boy. Starring Max von Sydow as well, who got nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And what many people consider to be the worst Best Picture nominee of the 21st century. And I don't think this needs any explanation for this. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Yep. This movie is absolute shit. Oh my gosh. And this is the only movie that it rightfully goes into the double F tier. It is without a doubt the worst Best Picture nominee of the 2010s. I think everyone agrees that everyone would prefer watching films like Crash, Green Book, Bohemian Rhapsody, any Weinstein movie. Everyone agrees this is the worst Best Picture nominee to date. Oh my gosh. What can I basically talk about this movie? The only thing I can mention... Now, first up, I want to mention that I am autistic. For those who are new to my channel, I have Asperger's syndrome. And I understand that Thomas Horn was a child actor at the time. But I wonder now, since he's definitely older, I wonder now how he feels about that performance now. Because, oh my gosh. I would say that's kind of a very... I'm not really blaming him, since he was a minor, so I have to go toward the direction by Stephen Daldry, Scott Rudin's producing, and David Hare's writing. But oh my gosh, all three of them, that was a very highly offensive autistic performance. Now, I can't say it's not the worst offensive one, because I know many people will point out Maddie Ziegler in music, but when it comes to something like this is highly offensive. I mean, Oscar is just so unlikable. He just has this massive, almost like, ego to himself that he doesn't, like... Okay, I get the scenario of the whole concept of him trying to find this key of a face that was found by that his dad had gotten before he died on 9/11. But it's just that the way how his dialogue is just written, it just makes him like everything has to be all on him and no one else. Not even like he's doing it for his dad, I get it, but it's just like he doesn't care about anyone that he meets. All the blacks that he's meeting, and like the last name is Black, not like racially or anything like that. I don't even like that last name Black. I think they should have done a better last name, honestly. But it's just so ridiculous, and just like everything that he has to deal with throughout the situation is just, I don't know. And even his Sandra Bullock doesn't really do much in the movie. And I can honestly agree with Max von Sydow's character, who is known as the renter in this movie, who just only uses his hands to interact with. He just doesn't even care about Oscar as well. With just put the note on his hand throughout the entirety of the movie, and just almost saying, I can't. Obviously, I would have told the kid to get out of there. I can't swear, obviously, to Oscar, because the character is a kid, so... But, oh my gosh, it's just like, oh man, just get out of my life, to be precise. And this is definitely, from an autistic person who has... This is just an offensive one that I think one of the worst portrayals of autism in movies. Now, I obviously can't say I haven't seen Music, but definitely one of the worst. And everyone agrees that it is the worst film, Best Picture nominee of the Oscars of the 21st century so far. And from 2000 to 2025, yeah, this is like a big fuck you to the Academy for that nomination. You could have put in something like movies that makes more sense, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Heck, even Bridesmaids, despite me hating that movie, that made more sense of getting in Best Picture than this piece of shit. Oh gosh. Even A Separation would have been a good nomination, though, since it got that screenplay nomination. Or My Week with Marilyn. Even though Harvey Weinstein produced that movie, I like that movie more so than this. And everyone agrees all the Best Picture nominees are definitely better then extremely loud and incredibly shit. Oh gosh. Yeah, this is the only movie that rightfully goes in the double F tier. No other movie is going in that, and that tier was specifically for this movie. With that out of the way, let's get into another movie that I think has gotten more controversy in recent years, especially in 2020. Because this was one of the movies that had been called out as nowadays racist. Because this is a racial movie directed by a white person, and that is The Help by Tate Taylor. Which, by the way, this movie also gives the only Oscar nomination to Chris Columbus. Yes, the director of the first two Home Alone movies, the first two Harry Potter movies, produced The Help, and this is his only Oscar nomination to date. Although he also directed other movies like Pixels, but yeah. This is the movie he, almost like, I would say, the best movie he did not direct, I would say, but he did produce the film. And I am in the minority of this movie. And I know Viola Davis and Bryce Dallas Howard both regret doing their roles. I'll talk about them in a second. But I am in the minority that I actually like this movie. And I'm putting this one in B. Obviously, it's like the story, it's the white person learns how not to hate black people. And that's basically like what, specifically with Emily Stone's character. And yes, I'm calling Emma Stone by her real name. Yeah, she's fantastic in this movie. Yeah, it's just the whole scenario of her writing this book about the maids in this, segregated place or racial, I think it's, segregation time, I would say. I believe this movie is set in the 50s, I believe, or in the early 60s, I don't remember, but yeah. And it's just, like, yeah, you obviously have to feel sympathetic for the African workers, obviously, the maids specifically, with Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer. Yeah, I don't know if Octavia Spencer would regret doing this movie, or Emily Stone. That is a great question. We know two of the actresses do, but I'm not sure about the rest of the cast. Like, not just Stone and Spencer, who won an Oscar for supporting actress, but even, Allison Janney, who was the other? Jessica Chastain. That's the one I was thinking of. And honestly, Chastain would have been my personal pick for Best Supporting Actress, honestly, over Octavia Spencer. Yes, it's almost like, giving a Best Actress an acting win to a white person for a racial movie. Yeah, I know that doesn't seem that great in general, but that might be my favorite Chastain nomination. Well, she actually had 3 great nominations in general. With that, another movie we'll talk about in 2012 and Zero Dark 30. So she had a good list of 3 Oscar nominations. Yeah, the whole concept, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. Yeah, just the relationship between Stone and Davis's character throughout their individual journeys and seeing their respective perspectives. Obviously, Bryce Dallas Howard, fantastic villain, even though I understand she regrets doing this movie nowadays. Same thing with Davis, as I mentioned again. Yeah, I can see why Davis would regret this. I'm still questioning, would she regret doing Far From Heaven, another racial movie directed by a white person. Although the main character was a white person with Julianne Moore's character, but it is a massive question mark. That would be a good question to ask Viola Davis. Would she regret doing Far From Heaven? So, yeah, yeah, so Chastain would have been my pick for supporting actress. I think it might have been in my adapted lineup. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's interesting, kind of underperformed. It didn't show up like in costume design or original song for The Living Proof. Yeah, the year when they only had 2 nominations. So yeah. Yeah, I know some people are not going to like it. I do prefer watching this over Crash. And that's actually a good question. Would you watch Crash or would you watch The Help? I almost said wash there for a second. A bit mouth-tied, I would say. So yeah, I would go back to The Help more so than Crash. I would say The Help would just be on a straight B instead of a B+. Or maybe a B+ or a straight B. One of the two. Now we're into Hugo by Martin Scorsese, and I am putting this one in A tier. I really took to this movie. Martin Scorsese really did his attempt to make a family movie, and it really is that great. Although the movie bombed at the box office, which that was unfortunate, but it is still a fantastic movie. Just understanding the story of this young boy discovering something from a specifically Ben Kingsley's character, who's not really much of a standout in this movie, but trying to also connect with around the people around the train station, like obviously Sacha Baron Cohen, who plays the guard, and obviously the Chloe Grace Moretz character who plays the daughter of Kingsley's character, which I think she was fantastic. She would have been my personal winner for Best Supporting Actress of 2011. I'm surprised she was not nominated because they do like nominating young female actresses, as we would see in the following year with Convention Wallace and the previous year with Haley Steinfeld. But since they didn't recognize Shailene Woodley, they didn't recognize Chloe Grace Moretz either. So yeah, and that was a big role for her after her big breakthrough performance in Kick-Ass the previous year. So getting a role like that definitely really showed. And all of her scenes she has with Hugo, who was played by Asa Butterfield, all their scenes together, just exploring around their times together and even understanding the machine and also finding out Chloe's father's or is it grandfather's origins, I believe. I don't remember, but I believe it's father's origins. And it really is fantastic. Scorsese did a great job directing this. It did won five technical Oscars: production design, the sound categories, visual effects, and cinematography. So yeah, it would have been my personal pick for a best adapted screenplay for John Logan. And John Logan had a great year in writing in 2011, not just with Hugo, but also being one of the writers of our animated feature winner of that year, Rango. So he had a great year. I think the movie definitely should have gotten some acting nominations. Oh yeah, Sacha Baron Cohen should have been up for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, if he was not going to get in for Borat, obviously, if there would have been a role he would have gotten in that is not Borat, and obviously before the trial of the Chicago 7, it would have been for Hugo, honestly. I think he was great in Hugo. Emily Mortimer is good in her small performance as this flower girl, and obviously the recreation of the Gamal Parnasse accident that ironically would be the basis, the real-life tragedy would be the basis for the Thomas episode of Better View from Gordon for Season 5. So yeah, since if you knew that crash in that movie specifically because of the Thomas episode, then you're obviously going to see the unique recreation they did in Hugo the accident, even though it's a tragic accident. But in the movie, it's more of a dream sequence for Hugo, instead of like what happens in real life. So yeah, so there are some real life aspects, but since this is kind of a fictional story in the real world, so yeah, it is definitely creative, bringing some real life aspects into a fictional story, and a great fantasy aspect from Scorsese, and probably my favorite out of Scorsese's picture nominees, out of the three films that got a picture nominee of this decade. Speaking of Paris, let's go into Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, which is basically the last time the Academy would put a Woody Allen movie up for Best Picture, and the last time the Academy would give Woody Allen an Oscar, as he did one for Best Original Screenplay. Although they would recognize one more of his films 2 years later with Blue Jasmine, which wasn't up for Best Picture, but I think it would have been if there were 10 nominees. I am putting this one in S. I mean, this is I was kind of surprised at the whole time traveling aspect of this movie, where Owen Wilson's character goes from the 1920s back and forth throughout his time or something like that, and seeing all these real life iconic people of him trying to get his writing getting well praised by some of the iconic legends that were in there, from Gertrude Stein or Ernest Hemingway or F. Scott Fitzgerald, and even seeing Salvador Dali. It just seeing these real life people with him in person, it just almost feels like he's an outsider and he's just like welcomed in, despite of obviously this time status. And with his connection, obviously Gil, which is Owen Wilson's character, with Adriana's character, which is played by Marion Cotillard, their relationship they have of like from two different timestamps is fantastic. That even has a better relationship than Gil's real life fiance Inez, who is Rachel McAdams' character. And just seeing all these the connection that Wilson and Cotillard would have in their scenes when Gil specifically goes and see Adriana, and the relationship they would have, and even going a little bit further or back when that's a bit of a spoiler, but just the massive relationship the two had. And Cotillard definitely should have got in for Best Supporting Actress. Owen Wilson, almost would have been in my best actor lineup. I just felt like he almost like it's almost a weird scenario that it almost feels like this almost feels like a spin-off of Wedding Crashers, because both Owen Wilson and Rachel McAdams would be lovers at the end of that movie, and then like years later after they finally got engaged they go to Paris, and then the whole time stamps, although there's a completely different family status with McAdams' character. It's just interesting. I realized they were both in Wedding Crashers and together in Midnight in Paris. So that's a very interesting connection. Almost feels like a potential follow up, but it's not really. Even Lea Sedux also appears in this movie as well. Before she had a little bit more bigger in films like Blue is the Warmest Color, and of course the James Bond series with Spectre and No Time to Die, and other Franklin appearances in Wes Anderson movies like The Grand Budapest Hotel, which we'll get into, and even The French Dispatch as well. So, yeah, so I think that movie also had her scenes were also pretty good as well, even at the final scene that Gil has with Sedux's character as well. So yeah, I really loved the whole time traveling aspect. I mean, that would be fantastic in real life if you can time travel in midnight just to go to a specific decade, like in the 20s, or somewhere like getting a relationship for a single woman that never got married in real life. Obviously, you can't really change. You obviously do not want to do like Back to the Future and almost have something erased from existence. So yeah, if it's like a woman that has never been in love or had been single for her entire life, or was somebody unfortunately had sadly had okay, never mind. But I wouldn't go too dark, but you get the idea. But yeah, that would be fantastic, and even meeting like going back in time, like to see some famous people, and obviously just not have influence in their life to have them anything prevent them from the future. It's just like kind of keep like what Gil did simply, and just have him like he did of just having people crediting almost like doing a grade on his writing specifically. Now we're into our big sports movie, somewhat, with Moneyball by Bette Miller, where not also got Brad Pitt another acting nomination, and he also produced the film. Also got Jonah Hill his first Oscar nomination for a comedic actor in a dramatic performance. Written by Steven Zalian and Aaron Sorkin, with the story credited by Stan Shervin, adapting a book from Michael Lewis, which that will not be the only time of this decade that a book from Michael Lewis would be adapted into an Oscar Best Picture nominated movie. If there were five, I think this probably would have been a number five for Best Picture, with The Artist, The Descendants, Hugo, and Midnight in Paris, because other than the two acting nominations in screenplay, it also got in for film editing and an additional nomination for sound. I think that might be more for another. Somebody would do a video if there were five from 2009 through 2000 for obviously today. What would it be? So yeah, but like with The Social Network, I think this also could be maybe why I wasn't big on Sorkin's writing on for his first few films. Although obviously I know what I said about The Social Network, because probably with David Fincher's direction. I think it might be due to the editing and maybe with the co-writing by Steven Zalian, and with the performances kind of made me bored with this movie. And I would even go back to The Social Network more so. So yeah, boredom means E tier. I mean, I don't know much, really remember much. It obviously kind of talks about the Athletics this time, Oakland Athletics, obviously, when they were called back then, of where they were going through the season and stuff like that. And ironically enough, I was surprised that Chris Pratt is in this movie. And this is another case where an actor who before was in the MCU was in something like this. And yeah, so Chris Pratt was in a Best Picture nominated movie in a very small role, but obviously playing one of the notable baseball players in that team at the time, before he was in the MCU as Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's interesting. So 3 years before he became Star-Lord, he was in a Best Picture money movie with Moneyball. So yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to see. You never guess of an MCU actor will have a very small role in one of his earlier movie careers, and then years later they would be in the MCU. So that's kind of ironic. We mentioned this even with Don Cheadle back in the 2000s. So Yeah, but yeah, it's that's kind of very odd to know. But yeah, I just don't remember much of this movie. I don't think it's just not something that I wouldn't go back to. So I wouldn't like. It's not really a big sports movie. It doesn't have like a lot of baseball scenes. It's just like a lot of them talking and trying to how to make the team successful, and that's it. Speaking of somewhat boredom, let's go into The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. A lot of people are obviously, some people are obviously on. Many people consider this the best of that year. Some even consider it one of the most boring films of the year. I do kind of consider it boring, but although I will admit I did like a portion of the movie, I think it was like around the middle of the portion, like where our supposed main character is like in his late kid years, and with just him and Chastain as the mother, it's just like some of his scenes were pretty great, but the rest, like from the beginning, we're all just seeing the atmosphere, and then like some of the scenes with Brad Pitt and Sean Penn, it just doesn't really stand out to me. So although there was a great portion of it, I'm gonna have to put this because of the portion with it, the great portion of it that I did like, I have to put this in D. I almost put it in E, but I think that one portion I have with the movie, I think it's like 45 minutes of somewhat of the movie. I think it like around 45 minutes of the movie I believe I did enjoy, like somewhere in the middle, but it just like the rest of it just doesn't really do much for me. The cinematography is just not really something ironic, and it's interesting cuz I also did like you would think, oh, is it because I'm not a Terrence Malick guy? It's interesting because this was my first film from him. I then also did saw The Thin Red Line, which I was very bored with it as well. But I did like Days of Heaven though, so one of his earlier movies. So I haven't seen his and The New World. It's his masterpiece. I love The New World so much. Definitely one of the best telling stories of the real life story of Pocahontas, even though I've not watched the Disney film. But yeah, I do love The New World, but when it comes to films like The Tree of Life or The Thin Red Line, not really my thing, especially The Tree of Life. I think The Thin Red Line, I would actually go back to The Tree of Life over The Thin Red Line, but definitely Days of Heaven and especially The New World over that film. And now we come into Warhorse, one of the two Steven Spielberg movies released that year, the other being his animated debut feature, The Adventures of Tintin. Both of his massive comebacks after the disappointment of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I am giving this one an A. I really, it's so interesting with me and that film and Seabiscuit, two horse movies that were up for Best Picture, both go in the A tier, where one deals with racing and the other one deals, I believe, with World War One. So, yeah, just basically going through the whole story of Joey, and I can't believe I remember the horse's name because of Billy Crystal's monologue he did that year. Obviously, his musical monologue. Yeah, so the whole Joey story going from being a farm horse to dealing with massive war territories and his survival like throughout entirety of needs spending time with a little girl and then being on the enemy side for a couple of years and then on the well actually he was I think in the ally side then was with the little girl and her dad's farmer's family and then obviously with the enemy side and then getting back to the real life side to meet with his owner trying to find his owner after so many years. um, so yeah, just the whole journey of going through a horse's perspective, like it's just dealing with all the ups and downs of the lighthearted moments with having an owner, like whether it be his original one or with the little girl, farm girl specifically, and then the situations with the war side, both with the Allies and the Axis at the time. It's just like all the massive difficulty of being one horse one way or another. Be brave is the only thing I do remember. I think that monologue. If I'm correct, Benedict Cumberbatch is in this movie, right? Yes, he is, along with Tom Hiddleston as well in this movie. Emily Watson's also in this. I didn't even recognize Emily Watson or David Thewlis. I believe they're, yeah, they're her. No, I don't know where David Thewlis is, but Emily Watson's the mother of Albert, the first owner of Joey. I didn't even recognize her. So yeah, Cumberbatch I did know was in this movie as one of the soldiers, but I didn't even know Tom Hiddleston or Emily Watson were in this movie. Yeah. Um, Out of all of Spielberg's best picture nominees of this decade, I do think it is my favorite one. But I would not but I would say my second favorite picture nominee of the century by him. Definitely way better nominee over Munich any day. We continue with 9 here in the year 2012. And we start this up with the Austria film Amor, our first of 3 non English films that were up for Best Picture of this decade by Michael Haneke, which did win, of course, for Best Foreign Language Film. And I am giving this one a B. The story, obviously, of this husband having to deal with his wife after having this silent stroke that she had, and having to try to master difficulty. Now, Miko Haneke kind of has a bit of an interesting filmography when it comes to dealing with, I don't know how to describe it without going to spoiler territory. Dealing with people's situations, I would say. Well, I can't really explain it. Now, obviously, the massive situation obviously is regarding the subject of a silent stroke, and now he has to deal with taking care of her, despite them both being around old ages, with obviously with Jean-Louis Strellant and Emmanuel Riva, the latter of which got a Best Actress nomination for her career. And just having the difficulty. So the story definitely really has something in connection, although there is a weird twist that, of course, comes into play, but that's obviously some of Haneke's previous films have done something similar to that. Minus, I would say, The Piano Teacher, but I think one movie I know for a fact that deals with something that almost has something connection with. Isabelle Huppert is also in this movie, just a few years before she gets her first Oscar nomination as, I believe, their daughter, and she really is fantastic in this. And I'm surprised both her and Trinant were both overlooked in the acting categories. I think they would have been great Best Actor and Supporting Actress nominees, respectively. Riva definitely would have been in my personal, also would be in my personal actress lineup. I think original screenplay, would it be my pick for... Yeah, it would be my pick for foreign language film. I know Kon-Tiki would have been a good movie, but I would have probably ruled that ineligible, but that would be definitely for the international feature tier list in a future video. There's. I think production design probably would have been the only other category I think I would have put more in here. But the performances and just really captivate the movie with Haneke's direction. I can see why a lot of people really did took to the movie as being one of the top tier candidates for a Best Picture nominee of that year. Speaking of Best Picture, let's go into our winner of that year and our first film since Driving Miss Daisy to win Best Picture without getting a director nomination, Argo from Ben Affleck, which, don't worry, although he didn't get in for director, he still took home a win for producing the film, along with George Clooney, and I keep forgetting Clooney has 2 Oscars. I know he has the acting win for Syriana, but I keep forgetting, I even forgot about this when I was about to record this part, that I, like days before this, that I keep forgetting that he did produce Argo, so he has 2 Oscars in general. So it kind of almost like it's a make-up win for him not winning Best Actor the previous year for The Descendants, I would say, and obviously give one of Clooney's longtime collaborating producers, Grant Heslov, his first Oscar. The only other wins it got were adapted screenplay for Chris Terrio and film editing, which ironically William Goldberg lost to himself in this category for another picture nominee that we'll get into at the end. Honestly, the story definitely felt great, but I just didn't really care about the performances and the suspense as much. So I have to put this in D. It definitely has a great story. It wasn't boring, but I don't know if I felt cold watching the movie, but it's just like the impact on me just didn't seem that interesting, honestly. So, yeah, I don't, like, it just, like, I felt very mixed in the movie. It wasn't a bore fest. It wasn't bad. I just think I think the direction from Ben Affleck wasn't a standout or was off, or the editing or some of the performances. Like, Alan Arkin didn't need to get in for Best Supporting Actor. I don't understand that nomination. Yeah, like his last Oscar nomination for his career, that was definitely not a great win, I would say. It's just so odd. And even the cast list, like, yeah, I know John Goodman was in this movie, but if I'm correct, wasn't Bryan Cranston also part of this movie as well? As, like, wasn't he, like, what, the ambassador or something like that? Because if I remembered, he was, one of the, who was up on stage. Yeah, he was yeah, Cranston was on this because he was also up on stage with some of the other cast and crew members of the movie that were there when Argo won Best Picture. Because I thought he was the Canadian ambassador, but he plays someone else. Kyle Chandler's in this movie as well. Um, yeah, where was? Oh, he plays the CIA director. That's the reason why. Yeah, like obviously, yeah, having a story of trying to rescue some American refugees in what was it? It's in where is it again? I know I'm gonna in Iran, obviously, especially how the U.S. and the Iranian government do not have a great relationship, especially with all the controversies involving Iran, especially in recent films like that have been kind of calling out, like The Seed of the Sacred Fig, for an example. And obviously, the whole story of Antonio J. Mendez actually trying to get his way to make a fake movie and to try to get them out of there. So, yeah, it seemed a really great concept to adapt this real life story, but it just didn't work well execution wise. Probably because there's not a single character that is very memorable in this film. Like the performances just doesn't really do anything, and even Ben Affleck starring himself. I think if Affleck did not star himself and just directed the movie, I think it. I wonder who he would have gotten to play the Antonio J. Mendez role instead of himself. I don't know, maybe his friend Matt Damon. And now we come into Beasts of the Southern Wild. I believe the directorial debut of Ben Zeitlin, unless I'm mistaken, adapting the play Juicy and Delicious, and the movie that got a historic Best Actress nomination for Convention Wallace. And I forgot to mention about it more. Emmanuel Riva became the oldest nominee in the lead actress category. Convention Wallace became the youngest nominee, I believe at 7 or 9. I don't remember, but she was pretty young back then. And I'm going to put this in A tier. I really took to this movie a lot of Hush Puppy. I believe that's what her character's called, of her journeying with her from where their original home was to some sort of land that she doesn't want to give up on, especially with her relationship with her father, played by Dwight Henry, who should have gotten in for Best Supporting Actor, by the way. Definitely. And yep, I'm going to say this. Wallace would have been my best pick for Best Actress, as well as Ben Zeitlin for Best Director, and also my pick for Adapted Screenplay as well. I think it should have won 3 out of the 4 Oscars it was up for. Best Picture would not be my pick. That would be at number 2. But it was such a fantastic movie watching it. I almost put it in an S, but I think there might be a portion I might be forgetting. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, so yeah, it's just definitely a fantastic movie. And this was unfortunate that this was the only Best Picture nominee of that year to go home empty-handed. It did not win a single Oscar. If it did, it probably would have won Director, and that would have been its only other option, since Ben Affleck was missing for Argo that year. But obviously he went to an obvious choice. So, yeah, definitely the movie that got Convention A. Wallace into the stardom. I'm surprised Dwight Henry, if he was nominated for supporting actor, I think he might have got a lot more roles. But it's interesting, Ben Zeitlin's follow-up movies hadn't had really much of a standout compared to his debut feature. Unless he had a previous film, I might be wrong on that. But yeah, fantastic movie, definitely a great Best Picture nominee, and definitely would have worthy of me taking it 3 out of the 4 Oscars if it should have had. But my Best Picture pick for 2012 would easily be Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, even though, yes, it's a Weinstein Company movie. But this is going in S tier. I mean, how can I not deny about this movie? This is definitely my favorite Tarantino movie I've seen out of his, out of all of his Best Picture nominees, out of the 3 I've seen, except for Pulp Fiction. Yeah, I've not watched Pulp Fiction, so yeah, that's gonna probably put me a lot of people in the comments saying, you need to watch that movie. I know. But just in terms of the century, definitely Django Unchained. And out of his 3 films of that decade, it was easily Django. The Hateful Eight didn't get in for Best Picture of 2015, though. Yeah, the way how obviously, I feel like this is definitely one of the movies. Yeah, I know it's a racial movie directed by a white person, but since the movie stars an African with Jamie Foxx, and you have people but you got to keep in mind as well, this is Quentin Tarantino who abolished the Nazis in Inglourious Basterds, so going from that to abolishing slavery in Django Unchained, And just basically, I think many people would say, okay, that's one of the few exceptions, and maybe like In the Heat of the Night as well. So yeah, because it's Tarantino we're talking about, and how he can do anything to actually kind of call out these things that almost feel like he would have changed the test of time. And obviously, Django Unchained on his way of slavery is just fantastic and definitely deserved the best original screenplay Oscar. Christoph Waltz, though, for supporting actor, honestly, I would have preferred either Leonardo DiCaprio or my personal pick of the cast, Samuel L. Jackson. And it's odd he only has the one nomination for Pulp Fiction. A lot of people thought he would have gotten in actually this past year for The Piano Teacher, but that went and came and went. So, yeah, Django probably would have been the closest, I think, for a supporting nomination, and then The Hateful Eight. Yeah, he definitely should have been up for the supporting actor candidate. And Weinstein was campaigning DiCaprio, and then Waltz took the win. And Waltz is actually the second actor to win for two Oscars for acting Oscars for directed by the same guy. The first was Diane Wiest for winning for two roles in Woody Allen movies. I believe it's Hannah and Her Sisters and Bullets Over Broadway, unless I'm mistaken on Wiest's first Oscar. And now Christoph Waltz with Tarantino's roles for Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained. So, yeah, so if he's up again for another Tarantino movie, put him up for acting, I guess. Although it might, well, depend on how whenever Tarantino's new movie will come out. So, yeah, Samuel Jackson would have been my personal pick, but yeah, that's a very interesting. Waltz won 4 years after his first Oscar, so, yeah, like his character, I think I would have casted somebody else as Django's the sidekick, but it's Jamie Foxx. He's fine. The character is well written. I just think I think it's just a lot of the supporting performances kind of outshine him. But definitely shines out over Kerry Washington, obviously, who plays Django's wife in the movie. And obviously, DiCaprio's infamous scene where he accidentally cut his own hand from a glass, and obviously retake the shot of putting fake blood in his hand and putting blood over Kerry Washington's face. And that was obviously one of the most notable movies that was not intentional for the film, but it went through in the final cut. Like that was not even in the script, but it was just like a major accident that ended up going through the final cut of the film. So, wow, credit on. Well, obviously it wasn't DiCaprio's fault for cutting his own hand, but credit on Tarantino for keep having a crazy idea for that to make the villain his character more suspense. So yeah, this would have been my pick for original screenplay and definitely for best picture. I don't know why Tarantino was not up for director and why was it not up for best film editing. That's my question. Now into our big musical of this one, Les Miserables, Tom Hooper's follow-up to The King's Speech. I actually really do like this movie a lot more than a lot of people do, and I am putting this one in B. I almost consider an A, but some of the supporting performances other than Anne Hathaway and maybe Amanda Seyfried and maybe Eddie Redmayne, it's just the rest of the other supporting cast, especially Russell Crowe. I know that's one. Obviously, many people already talked about him, so I don't really need to go into an explanation. But Hugh Jackman, fantastic as Jean Valjean. Oddly enough, that's his only Oscar nomination to date. Many people thought he could have gotten in for Logan, but it's just the movie just came out way too early, even though it got in for adapted screenplay, though. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, I do like it a lot more than I do. I do like it a lot more than people do. I do prefer maybe The King's Speech, but I could go back and forth between those two films, and maybe even The Danish Girl as well. I've not watched Cats, so I can't really say. It did won 3 Oscars, though, for obviously for Hathaway's performance, but also for sound mixing and makeup and hairstyling. Yeah, definitely the sound mixing definitely would be it's a great win. It would definitely be my pick in that year's category, so definitely a great win for sound mixing. Suddenly, a great new song added to the movie. I do love the One Day More performance, and not just in the movie, but even at the Oscars as well, with the addition of Hathaway's dialogue. In fact, obviously, for the past 2 U.S. presidential elections, both in 2020 and 2024, I actually ended up listening to the movie's version of One Day More, obviously on the eve of the night before the election day. And I know many people are probably going to do that. And I think I'm going to have to do that again when we get into the 2028 U.S. presidential election. It's just like, oh gosh, it's just one way, shape, or form it's going to go, and it's going to go bad one way, shape, or form. Since I'm not on either side as an independent, Ugh, I'm not going into it, but it is obviously the go-to song for the night before the U.S. presidential elections, I will say. Man, and maybe even in any later election years specifically, like not just in here in the U.S., but also in Canada or Australia, like any presidential or prime minister election, whatever country you live in, it's always the massive fight between the citizens and the hierarchy governments. And that's kind of what Les Miserables kind of almost basically is. But I think the massive difference, I believe, is the citizens versus the law officials. That's kind of like what it is in the 2019 French movie. That's almost kind of a modernized telling of the story, but it's just like, but with young kids and the police, and that's just it. That's all I know about that film, even though I did watch it a couple of years ago, but that would be more of a discussion in that international tier as well. Now we go into the movie that took the most wins with four for its score, cinematography, visual effects, and the directing win for Ann Lee, Life of Pi. I am putting this one in B as well. The whole getting to like the whole journey of this young man de- being stranded on like obviously on this boat with this tiger, of his survival throughout it, because obviously this massive storm unfortunately caused him to be in the difficulty situation with him being on the river with the tiger. And we have seen like other movies that have dealt with sea survival, like Castaway, although that's kind of more in the latter of the film, like in the later in the film, and then even Unbroken at the beginning. But this one kind of primarily focuses being lost at sea. I know All Is Lost is another movie that was released the year after this film, but dealing with a man and a tiger, and the relationship that this young man has to deal with the tiger is just so odd that you would never think, even though this is based on a novel, since this is not a real life story. And the visuals are just fantastic, even though this was like early 2010s, because obviously you can't do a real life tiger because that would not work well. Same thing with Gladiator, of course. They also use visual effects on the tigers as well, because it's a little bit too dangerous. So yeah, the connection with obviously the direction from Ann Lee was definitely a great standout. I could see why he took the win, although Ben Scheitwin would have been my personal pick, but Ann Lee would have been my second pick. Visuals really spectacular. I even ended up getting the Blu-ray, which ended up coming, I believe, with a 3D disc as well, so a 3D edition. So, although I don't have I don't know if I have a 3D feature on my Blu-ray cassette or not, but it is great worthing having it in the collection. Now into our most nominated film of that year, Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, his follow-up to both Warhorse and Tintin, which earned, I believe, 11 or 12 nominations, and it did one, obviously, for actor for Daniel Day-Lewis, which was his third win in the leading acting category, which he holds the record still, and even a surprising one for production design over Anna Karenina, by the way, which I think a lot of people, including myself, was expecting that to win. Um, I honestly do prefer watching Warhorse, but I think it's also on the same level as Munich for me, and I'm putting this one in E. Yeah, I'm putting this in E. I just like, yeah, it is the whole story, obviously, Abraham Lincoln, and obviously it's very interesting to see how Republicans were legit Republicans, and at the time the Democrats were the crazy ones. And now looking at it now, it's just like you either view the Democrats as the crazies or the Republicans as the crazies, or for me, both of them. Even though Republicans are a lot more crazier, or I would say. It's just how things changed. We were, and how the Democrats were the evil ones, and some people now say, and now the Republicans are the evil ones. So that's just so bizarre watching this movie and see how things were different between these two American times, where we are in the Lincoln presidency and now in the Trump presidency. Wow. Um, yeah, the idea obviously having the story of Lincoln's movement of the endment of slavery and not focusing on the war aspect is a really an interesting story, since this is based on the book Team of Rivals: The Political Geniuses of Abraham Lincoln, where Tony Kushner adapted from. It's just, I think, the performances and maybe Spielberg's direction did not stand out for me. Day-Lewis, although looks like Abraham Lincoln, and obviously the now speech, but I just don't think all of his other scenes, except for the now speech, wasn't a standout. Sally Field as his wife, also just playing the stereotypical wife first lady role. Tommy Lee Jones, I would say, is fantastic as Thaddeus Stevens, and definitely who was one of the true heroes of the ending of the Civil War. And he did win the SAG Award, I believe, and he would have been my pick for supporting actor. All of his scenes were fantastic, and just all of his moments, and definitely truly why Thaddeus Stevens was one of the real heroes, other than Abraham Lincoln, of the ending of the Civil War. And definitely, like, I know he already won for The Fugitive years back, but if he didn't win for The Fugitive, I think this would have been a great Oscar win for Tommy Lee Jones. Now into Silver Linings Playbook, the second installment of David O. Russell's Best Picture trilogy, and this is the other Weinstein Company movie that also had another nomination and got a win for actress for Jennifer Lawrence, the year she had with not just this and The Hunger Games. I am putting this one in D. It is definitely the best out of the three movies, I would say, in my personal opinion, because of some of the performances. Like, Lawrence's performance is probably the one that stands out to me the most. But it's just like the crazy health issues that Bradley Cooper's character has to deal with, and the relationship with his parents, especially with De Niro's character. But the romance moments with between Lawrence and Cooper's characters, especially how they are practicing the whole dancing scenes, are definitely the highlights. It's just, I think, with Lawrence's performance, probably why it kind of is the only good thing about the movie, and maybe the cinematography, but that's just not saying much. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of. Obviously, as you can see, I'm not a big David O. Russell guy. We'll get into his next film in about after we talk our final 2012 Best Picture nominees. So, yeah, and obviously, when Lawrence won Best Actress, she tripped on the stairs. So, and then she would even tripped on the red carpet the following year. So, yeah, so she doesn't have great luck. But so she obviously would win this Oscar, of course, for this performance, which is the best out of her. Well, obviously, out of all of her nominated performances in a David O. Russell movie, yes. But in terms of her best one, it's still easily Winter's Bone. Is it my personal pick to win? Maybe. She's kind of in my personal lineup as a filler spot if you do count just the Oscar-nominated movies. Now we end 2012 with Zero Dark 30, the Catherine Bigelow's follow-up to The Hurt Locker, and one of the movies that tied for Best Sound Editing, the other one being the James Bond movie Skyfall, the latest tie in the Academy's history so far. So, I ended up liking this a lot better than The Hurt Locker. Obviously, kind of like with Hugo and Midnight in Paris, this is kind of a fictional story with some real-life aspects. Obviously, this is kind of a fictional story of the searching and finding of Osama bin Laden. And I am putting this one in B. I do think this was a much better movie than The Hurt Locker. Jessica Chastain's performance kind of basically really takes the whole movie specifically and the whole journey of finding Osama bin Laden in this fictional story. Obviously, Osama bin Laden would, of course, be ironically, the movie, I think, was made around the same time when they actually legit found him. So, and obviously, of course, Bin Laden was found and killed. And like with Moneyball, Chris Pratt is also in this movie as well, along with Joel Edgerton. Germany Strawn is also in this movie. Kyle Chandler, probably the most notable one. Jason Clarke. So yeah, there are still a couple of notable names that you would not know that were also in this movie, other than Chastain and Kyle Chandler. I can see why it did one for sound editing. Though I think Skyfall probably had more of the louder moments. I think Django Unchained would have been my personal pick in that category. The script, I think, for Mark Bold did much better job of the whole build up compared to like a fictional story with the Hurt Locker. Although Django would still be my pick in original screenplay, though. Zero Dark 30 would still have been the nomination. Same thing with Chastain, though. It would not have won anything in terms of the top 8 for me. But I do think this was a massive improvement for me over the Hurt Locker. Now into 2013, where I remembered this in my predictions. I believe I ended up getting 21 out of 24 categories correct. The only categories I didn't got correct were film editing and animated short and live action short, because the short films are always not that easy to predict, and I was predicting Captain Phillips for film editing instead of Gravity. And we begin this up with the third and final installment of the David O. Russell Best Picture trilogy, and one of the biggest Oscar losers, going 0 for 10, American Hustle, which I believe was originally called American Bullshit as his original title, but this is going in E. It's definitely his weakest film, and many people would definitely agree it's the weakest out of his 3 Picture nominees. It's just like there's just so many characters, and I think that with having 3 leads in the movie, yes, there are 3 leads, not just Christian Bale and Amy Adams, but even Bradley Cooper. It's just that all 3 of them, just having 3 leads in the movie, that just kind of makes the movie a bit, like, a little bit too much characters being, like, I would say a little bit more insane, as I would say, because The Fighter obviously has some, and Silver Linings Playbook both have insane moments, but I think American Hustle is just too much stuff going on, like insaneness going on, not just with like the whole production design and the costumes, but even I think a lot of drug status, I believe, in the movie, and even like Jeremy Renner, I believe his part is very forgettable. I don't remember him because he wasn't even up for any acting prizes. Robert De Niro, I don't remember much him in this movie. Yeah, I'm glad this movie did not win any of those Oscars, honestly. I would have not nominated for anything. Probably Bale and Cooper probably would have been the closest thing, but they would have been in the Best Actor category, but not by much. Yeah, man, this movie was just not for me. Yeah, so I would have called this American Bullshit. It's not a terrible movie. It's not an F tier, but yeah, it is bullshit. But let's go into a better movie, and that is Captain Phillips from Paul Greengrass. S tier, easily. I mean, I gotta ask, how on earth did Tom Hanks not get nominated for Best Actor? I have no idea, because that was, like, probably the performance of 2013. That was his best performance, I think, in recent years. And he had a decent year with that and Saving Mr. Banks. But Captain Phillips was, like, his best performance he has had. This was not him playing himself or trying to be a famous person. This was him playing Richard Phillips. And with the serious role he had to play with somebody who actually got hostage, a real-life person, of Somalia pirates, and with his connections with Barkat Abdi's character, who played Abdul Musa, and especially Faisal Ahmed, who, one of the Somalian pirates who was almost like the second in command or something like that, who really wanted to kill Richard Phillips in almost all of his scenes, was more intense than Abdul throughout the entirety of the movie. And with Paul Greengrass' direction was so fantastic. I'm sad this movie got home empty-handed. It would have been a great win for film editing, although that had 2 other great nominations as well, with Gravity and 12 Years a Slave. Adapted screenplay, a great nomination, but Tom Hanks definitely should have been up for Best Actor. He would have been my winner in that category. Out of all the 5 nominees, he would have been my winner even more so than those 5 nominations. It's like one of the biggest acting snubs of the 2010s for sure. Now we come into a movie that many people have nowadays also have considered this a bit outdated, not because of the subject matter, but one of the casting decisions, and that is Dallas Buyers Club by Jean-Marc Vallée. I am putting this one in, sorry to put this, but I'm putting this in A. I really do like this whole story of how this massive AIDS crisis is going on with the real-life story of Ron Woodroof, I believe, Matthew McConaughey's person that he's playing in the movie. It's just fantastic film. It would have been my personal pick for Best Original Screenplay. It did win 3, though, for makeup and hairstyling, and both supporting actor for Jared Leto and actor for McConaughey. Now, McConaughey definitely would be my pick for Best Actor in general in terms of the Oscar nominees, but obviously Hanks would be my Best Actor winner in general in my personal lineup, but McConaughey definitely would have been a right second place, without a doubt. When it comes to Jared Leto, I am sorry to do this, but I might agree with the Academy. I think he definitely would be my personal, not also personal winner, but my personal Oscar pick for supporting actor. Now, I understand it's now outdated to have a straight actor playing a trans role, because if this movie was made today, you would have to get a trans woman to play Rayon. You can't have a straight man playing that roles, because if it did, it would have gotten a lot of backlash in today's standards. But obviously, it would get it years later. And obviously, Jared Leto as an actor now has become more of a joke. No pun intended, because of him as the Joker in Suicide Squad, but also with Morbius, a movie I liked that I actually did like. Obviously, House of Gucci, and obviously now people are not looking forward to him in Tron Arrayas, I believe that's what it's called. So, yeah, it's just many people consider him one of the worst actors working today just because he's a joke for the box office and stuff like that. He was almost close to getting in The Little Things back in 2020 in House of Gucci, but yeah, after his win, his career went downhill, and many people even probably say Dallas Buyers Club is also one of his worst ones because of him playing a trans woman. I also like to shout out Jennifer Gardner in this movie, which I'm surprised she was overlooked for Best Supporting Actress. I think she was fantastic as the one doctor who really did care about Ron and a lot of the people who were dealing with the AIDS situation going on. And she really felt sympathetic for Ron and all the people that unfortunately were dealing with this massive crisis going on with their health. I definitely think she would have been a great Best Supporting Actress nomination. Probably this would have been the closest thing for her to get an actual Oscar nomination of her career. Sean McFarlane did a great job directing. It is such a shame that with that and Wild, two great films he had, unfortunately, it's sad that he sadly took his own life. And he made a lot more great movies if, like, I know he also made the miniseries Big Little Lies, but he would have been a great director if he would have continued on, because because with this and Wild, two great movies that he has done. So may he rest in peace, and you made two great movies, sir. And now we come into the film that took the most wins, and probably the reason why many of us had gotten a great total score of predictions-wise, with me getting 21 and 24, Gravity, because it dominated the tech categories for the sound categories, original score, visual effects, of course, cinematography, which gave Emmanuel Lubensky his first win, film editing, which I did not predict, and directing for Alfonso Cuarón. It almost won Best Picture, but because especially since it did tie to the Producers Guild of America with 12 Years a Slave, but obviously without the screenplay nomination, and with Sandra Bullock already previously winning Best Actress, that was not going to do it. It was probably the only chance it would have won a Best Picture prize was the Golden Globes for Motion Picture Drama, but they still went with 12 Years a Slave. I am putting this one in A as well. I think this is the best use of the one-take aspect, and obviously it would be the first one of the four films that would do that, the other one being The Revenant, Birdman, and Roma, which we'll talk about in the next part when we go in the films of the second half of the 2010s. But this one definitely works well, not just with Lubezki's cinematography, but I think it was the editing by Alfonso Cuarón and Mark Sanger. That movie was just paced well of just where they had to make sure in Cuarón's direction where Sandra Bullock has to go through the production design and obviously her being alone in space. And yeah, this is definitely, I would say, a better nomination for her than The Blind Side, honestly. Although she would be my second pick for Best Actress that year, behind one other performance. Yeah, it's just definitely a better nomination than The Blind Side for sure. Cuarón definitely deserved the win for Best Director. Editing as well. I can't really say cinematography because I've yet to see The Grandmaster or Prisoners, so I can't really say about that. Visual effects, I've yet to see The Lone Ranger. The sound categories, mixing, I might give it to that or Captain Phillips. Both of those movies have great sound designs. Because Gravity stands out more for its sound editing than its mixing, honestly. But I can't really say because I have yet to see Lone Survivor either, or All Is Lost, which was up for sound editing. The score was pretty good, although I can't really say it would have been my pick because I've yet to see The Book Thief. But definitely the directing and editing went perfectly deservingly so. And I think the only one-take movie that does work well. And I also want to mention George Clooney definitely had a fantastic small performance and a great. This would have been a great supporting actor nomination for him. Yes, he's not much in the movie, but I think like the one scene he has somewhere in the movie that I can't really say. It's just a fantastic scene, and I think that definitely should have gotten him a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Even if it's a very small role, it's still probably one of his best performances. Now into Her by Spike Jonze, which many people have loved a lot more in recent years, even though it's interesting for having an actual human falling in love with a computer voice. I know that's very odd, because obviously now with artificial intelligence being a thing. Her, which did one for Best Original Screenplay, which gave Spike Jonze his first Oscar. I am putting this one in B. Yeah, the concept really seemed interesting. Obviously, it's a movie that might have aged a little bit too far, I would say. But I think what works well is Theodore, which is played by Joaquin Phoenix, and Samantha, which is fantastically performed by Scarlett Johansson. Although it's a voice performance, but it's definitely one of the best voice performances in a live action movie. I mean, that is probably one of her best, probably her best performance, I would say, since Lost in Translation. It's just like so fantastic. I believe she did got in at Critics' Choice, I believe. So that does even show that voice performances should be nominated, not just like for animated films and even motion capture performances, but even voice performances in live action movies. That is just basically just like a voice you just hear throughout the background, or just like that's just a computer device. It's just like a voice technology. It's just fantastic, I would say. Amy Adams is fine on this. The small scene with Rooney Mara is fine, and I believe this was the movie that got Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara into a relationship, I believe, because that's where I believe they first worked together on. So I think that's where I think they got their relationship from. The Moon Song, I do think it's a very nice song. Would it be my personal pick for original song? No. In context, out of context, that's still a great lineup, though. But though I have yet to see Mendel Long Walk to Freedom, and if you do count the disqualified song from Alone Yet Not Alone, but yeah, original screenplay. Still, I would have gone with Dallas Buyers Club. Scarlett Johansson definitely would have been up for supporting actress. Joaquin Phoenix wouldn't make it in my best actor lineup personally, unless if he is. But I haven't seen my personal lineup, but yeah, but he would just be on the outskirts, unfortunately. The production design, wow, the use of colors, the limited colors they have, that's just, I think a lot of reds, and I think some tannish colors, I believe, are the most frank ones I've seen in a lot of the buildings. So, although there are some weird sexual moments, I will say, that are kind of odd, especially the one video game point, like, scene in the movie, that was just awkward. I don't like that scene, so that could be one of the scenes I would not go back to, other than a lot of the moments with Theodore and Samantha together. Now we go into a cross-country American road trip to see somebody if he actually got $1 million with Nebraska from Alexander Payne. This is an E as well. It's just a weird road trip comedy for me. Like, yeah, it's basically a son taking his own father to see if he has the $1 million, and then his wife comes along and tags along on the trip, and it's just like, and just going throughout America, like, I know one scene is just like them at Mount Rushmore. I believe that was Bruce Dern's Oscar clip, but yeah, it's just like, it's just not really one of the best, not one of the great road trip comedies I've seen. The black and white thing probably might have not been unnecessary for this movie. June Squibb or Bruce Dern's performances, not even and Will Forte's performance as their son. It's just like, yeah, I would have not nominated this for any Oscars, honestly. I think this is, I've yet to see About Schmidt, though, but I think I would even go back to Election more so than Nebraska. Obviously, The Descendants, Sideways, and obviously when we get to The Holdovers, I prefer watching those films over Nebraska. I think out of all of his picture nominees, this might be my least favorite from Alexander Payne. And although he just only directed the movie, I think if he did wrote the movie, I think that could have been something a lot better. Next up, we go into a massive investigation and journey in Philomena by Stephen Frears. And I am also going to put this one in B as well. Getting to know about the story about Philomena trying to figure out who was her lost child and what happened to her, and with having this young man played by Steve Coogan come along, which Coogan actually did co-wrote the script, by the way, of him and Judi Dench's connections throughout their journey, trying to find out what's going on when they visit the nun nursery she was in before, when she got pregnant, of course, and where her child was taken. And then obviously trying to figure out the whole situation of where she was as a child to now trying to figure out all the solutions. And when it comes to the big massive conclusion, wow. And Judi Dench would have been my personal pick for Best Actress. Obviously, she was not there at the ceremony. She hadn't appeared in a lot of ceremonies after she was nominated for Pride and Prejudice. She wasn't there at the ceremony when she was up for Notes on a Scandal. I think she stopped attending the Oscars, but did attend when she was up for Belfast, surprisingly. Yeah, Steve Coogan and Jeff Pope's writing was definitely fantastic. A great nomination. Score was pretty good. Frears' direction wasn't really a standout. Same thing with Coogan's performance. I think it's just the script and Judi Dench's performance really captivated that movie, which is why I can see why it got in for Best Picture. I do prefer The Queen and maybe even The Grifters, which I did watch since it was available in the Criterion Collection over Philomena, but this is still a pretty good movie, and Florence Foster Jenkins as well. But I would still put this in definitely in one of my positive sides on Stephen Frears' filmography. Even I believe he also did My Beautiful Laundrette, if I'm mistaken. So yeah, 5 films by him that I actually did enjoy. And now we are into the movie that did win Best Picture, 12 Years a Slave, the first movie directed by an African filmmaker to win Best Picture, and colored filmmaker in general. I can't say African American because Steve McQueen is British. Rightfully, this is definitely one of the most important movies of cinema, I would say, and one of the most important of the 21st century, because it almost is basically kind of reminding me of Spielberg's Schindler's List. Because Schindler's List is a movie, obviously it is a Holocaust movie, but Schindler's List is basically a movie on why you should not hate Jewish people. 12 Years a Slave is basically a movie on why you should not hate black people in general, because of how much of their ancestors had suffered through the slavery era. And telling the story of a man who once was freed and unfortunately got tragically back into slavery for 12 years with 2 different owners throughout his journey, of Solomon Northup, and him telling the story of how how he had to get to the journey back to his freedom again. With all the situations he was going through and the connections he had with some of the people like Patsy, Lupita Nyong'o's character, and obviously with the slave owners he had with the first one played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and then Edwin Eaps, which was played by Michael Fassbender, with his wife played by Sarah Paulson. This is definitely one of the most important movies that you need to see. Like, Schindler's List, you should not hate Jewish people. 12 Years a Slave, you should not hate black people. And without a doubt, I would say, in my opinion, it is the best film of the 2010s and the best picture winner in general. My personal film of this 2010 decade. And I know it's a one-and-done movie. I do understand, yeah, it is a very difficult movie to watch, especially with a lot of the violence that occurs in this movie. But rightfully, it is very important why you need to see it. And rightfully, deservingly goes as a masterpiece, double S tier. I mean, it definitely, rightfully, deservedly so, deserved the win for Best Picture. Steve McQueen, although definitely would be in my director lineup, I still would have given it to Gravity. Definitely deserved adapted screenplay. Lupita Nyong'o especially did deserve Best Supporting Actress. I think that was her debut performance, if I'm mistaken. If that is, that's definitely one of the best debut Oscar wins, and definitely the Best Supporting Actress win of the 2010s, and probably, I would say, of the century so far, because that is a legit all-timer performance, and obviously it did brought her to her career, but her portrayal as Patsy, just seeing the situation of this real-life person, of where she was, especially with the struggling relationship she had with Edwin, and the infamous soap scene, obviously, that basically explains why she won the Oscar. And what happens after that would lead into Fassbender's Oscar clip in the ceremony, by the way. So, and obviously with all 3 of the characters, with Solomon, Edwin, and Patsy's big soap scene, that's just one of the perfect examples of fantastic acting in general. Although Chiwetel Ejiofor wouldn't be my personal pick for Best Actor, he still would have been in my personal lineup. Sarah Paulson was very overlooked in this movie. I think she would have been a great supporting actress nominee as well. Michael Fassbender, great nomination as well. So yeah, definitely the best, my personal, what I consider to be the best film of the 2010s and the best picture winner, I think, of the 25 years of this century, and definitely deservedly so. And now we go into almost like a drinking game of how many times you would hear the word fuck in this movie. And that is, of course, Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. I know it's odd going from one of the most important movies to cinema to one of the more crazier movies in cinema with its NC-17 rating and insane comedy. I am putting this one in. I know a lot of people love this movie, but I'm putting this in C tier. It's alright. I do like some of the performances, like Leonardo DiCaprio's Jordan Belfort, and just almost kind of like he's almost narrating his own movie. And almost like telling us, oh, this is my story, this is how it goes, and enjoy this entire slandering of the word fuck throughout the entirety. Enjoy the nudity, enjoy all the sexual moments, enjoy all the drugs, enjoy all the accidents, all the violence and stuff like that, and all the crazy shit you get. It's just like, that's a little too much for me. It's not as much as American Hustle. I prefer this much crazier than American Hustle's craziness, just because of some of the performances. Jonah Hill, no, definitely not. I would not put him in supporting actor. I mean, it's just DiCaprio, I think, just basically stands out, and Margot Robbie, this was the movie that got her into the spotlight as well. It's just, yeah. Scorsese, I wouldn't put him in for directing. The script by Terrence Winter is fine. I think it's just DiCaprio's performance just kind of stood out. 3 hours. Was the 3 hours worth it? I'm not really sure. Probably just for DiCaprio scenes, but it's just there's a lot of other scenes that I wouldn't put in, though. So I'm kind of hit or miss with this one, so I think this movie is just okay. Would it be in my personal picture lineup? No. DiCaprio might have been in my best actor lineup, but that would probably be the only spot the movie would be in my personal list. We went from 2 years to 10 to 3 years with 9, and now we're in the beginning of the first of 2 years with 8. Wrapping up the first half of this 2010s is 2014, or 2014, I would call it. So yeah, the first time that 8 nominations happened since what, somewhere in the 40s, I believe? I don't, or 30s? I'm not sure. I haven't looked this up, but yeah, that's so odd when we have 8 nominations. I mean, Foxcatcher would have made sense to get in for Best Picture in this field of 9, but oh well. So that didn't get in for Best Picture, so we can't talk about that movie, but we are talking about some of these other 8 films instead. Even though Foxcatcher was not my number 1 of that year, but I'm just saying. So we begin this up with American Sniper, probably a movie that really overperformed, that kind of was a last-minute underdog in the nomination season, because it didn't really show up majorly at Golden Globes or Critics' Choice or even the top guilds, like at SAG, but then like at PGA, DGA, I believe WGA, and BAFTA. That's when the movie really kind of showed it was more of a threat to get in other categories, replacing films like almost taking Foxcatcher's spot for Best Picture, or Bradley Cooper taking Jake Gyllenhaal's spot for Best Actor, or the movie getting in Gone Girl's spot for Best Adapted Screenplay. And many people point American Sniper overperforming at the industry awards, taking positions over Foxcatcher, Gone Girl, and Nightcrawler spots, some of the spots at the Oscars. And this movie would actually mark Clint Eastwood's final Oscar nomination, as he was a producer in the film for Best Picture, and this would be beginning of how much the Oscars really took to Bradley Cooper, not just as an actor, but also would become as a producer and a director. So since he was up for both picture and actor this year. And I'm actually going to put this in A. I actually really did like this movie a lot, even for a rewatch a couple years ago. And the story, obviously, I knew the story of Chris Kyle about, like, when the news was going on around, I believe, I forget where the years took place. I do apologize. But finding out about a movie about him that was made by Clint Eastwood, and with Bradley Cooper taking the role, and just like almost a year or two after his Chris Kyle's unfortunate murder, it really showed how much of a big war hero he was, especially during the war in Iraq or Afghanistan, as like being considered one of the greatest snipers in U.S. history, as obviously called the most lethal sniper in U.S. history, as that's what the autobiography the movie was based on, that Chris Kyle wrote with Scott McEwen and Jim DeFleece. Bradley Cooper is definitely fantastic here as Chris Kyle. I think he definitely would have been my personal pick for Best Actor that year. Even without Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler or David Oyelowo in Selma, Cooper definitely would be in my personal lineup, and he would be my personal winner. He is just fantastic as Chris Kyle. And Clint Eastwood's direction is so fantastic. And I also forgot to mention this right now. 2014 was the first year since 2007 and the first year since the Picture expansion that all 8 Best Picture nominees got away with something. And American Sniper did one for Best Sound Editing. The sound design definitely pretty great, but Eastwood definitely should have been in for director, although he wouldn't make it in my personal lineup, but I could almost see that would have been a great nomination for him, especially since his last film, Juror Number 2, barely got recognized by awards goers because Warner Brothers didn't really care about it. So that was unfortunate. So American Sniper is technically the last movie they really took respect to Clint Eastwood. Although Richard Jewell did got in for supporting actress for Kathy Bates and Sully got in for sound editing, this was the truly last Best Picture movie to be directed by Clint Eastwood to get in for Best Picture. And definitely a great conclusion, I would say. Now into our Best Picture winner, Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. I did actually rewatch this film at the beginning of this decade after I saw it a couple years, and I think I kind of still stand with it where I put it. I'm putting this in D. It's just like, I'm putting this in D because I do like the story concept. I just think it didn't needed to use the one-take aspect, and some of the performances just didn't really were not much of a standout. Even though Emily Stone is my favorite actress working today, I think this is her weakest performance, I would say, in terms of her Oscar nomination-wise. Yeah, it's definitely... I can see why she wasn't in the contender for this one, because, she would have been... Honestly, for me, I would have preferred Naomi Watts. Out of all the cast members of the film, she was probably the one that stood out to me out of all the cast members. Revisiting the movie, it's just there were a lot of moments I think was unnecessary, like the potential romance between Stone and Norton's character, and I know Michael Keaton playing the infamous Tidy Whitey scene, as Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu said in his acceptance speech. That scene, I think it worked better probably at the Oscars just because Miles Teller playing the drummer, was fantastic as a joke to reference Whiplash as well. Yeah, the score for Birdman, definitely a nice good use of the drumming. It's odd that it got disqualified, so that was very odd. The one take aspect I think was not necessary. Even the whole Birdman imagination scene wasn't really a thing. It didn't really need to get 10 nominations, I would say. Like the sounds definitely did not need to get those sound nominations. That was very odd. And the only reason why the movie did won was because it was really about movies, especially in the acting industry, and obviously, it swept all of the guilds except for WGA because it was ineligible. Yeah, this would not be a memorable Best Picture winner, and definitely not one of Inarritu's better movies. I honestly do prefer... My favorite one would be so far is Amores Barros. But I will admit, Birdman is definitely a better Best Picture winner than Richard Linklater's Boyhood. There's obviously multiple ways you can have it, but there is only one way, that obviously where Boyhood is going. Yep, it goes in F tier. Obviously, Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close, obviously deservingly still remains as the only film that's only going in that double F tier, but Boyhood almost could have been, because 2 hours and 45 minutes wasted my fucking time. Oh gosh. I think the biggest gripe I have the most with this entire movie is actually regarding not just that runtime, but the fact that the movie, specifically, let me put this up. If Mason's father had the full custody of his kids, I think this would have been a way much better movie, because having the mother having the full custody of Mason and his sister, I think that's where the problem is. I think it's just seeing Mason dealing with witnessing his sour relationship with specifically his mother has been having with many relationship with his first stepfather, and then a younger guy that is almost close to his age. It's just like, Mason just really doesn't care about this. And honestly, I mean, yeah, as I said, if the movie would have been all on like if Mason's dad had the full custody of the kids, I think this would have been a better movie. But since it's on the mother, it just really makes the movie go downhill. I mean, it's just the bad relationships that Mason's mother had. Why it just gets so frustrating. It's just, come on, where's the lighthearted moments? I know this is a dramatic movie, and I know Richard Linklater has a lot of lighthearted moments in a lot of his movies, like Dazed and Confused and the Before trilogy, although there are some dramatic moments, like in Before Midnight, for a prime example. But, like, yeah, I get he made this movie in 12 years, but it was not worth it. And honestly, I'm going to say this, Patricia Arquette, definitely, I would say, in my opinion, one of the most undeserving acting wins, I think, that I can think of for an Oscar, because that character just wasn't. I don't feel sympathetic for Mason's mother. I mean, she just chooses so much bad relationships, especially with her first marriage after her first divorce. Oh my gosh, that alcoholic husband. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely probably the most undeserving acting Oscar win, I think, of the century so far, especially in a span of 2 hours and 45 minutes. I would have loved if Mason's final scene with his mother would have been a lot almost similar to what would happen later with Moonlight, with Chiron's final scene with his mother in chapter 3 of Moonlight, at where Chiron's visiting his mother at the rehabilitation center and having this almost like Chiron's finally having his anger out at his mother and says, "I hate you, mother." I would have loved to seen that in Mason's final scene with his mother. Like, just telling her that the struggling life he has had with all the sour relationships that she has had, and like, and also with all the difficulties that has been going on with her, and all the places they had to move one way, shape, or form, and all the difficulty relationships he has with friends and families that he doesn't get often. Instead of Mason saying, "I hate you, mama," like Chiron does in Moonlight, I would have loved to see Mason said in his, like, in a final anger monologue scene, that he would have said, "I would have had dad had the full custody if I was around this age." I think everyone would agree. If Mason's father had the full custody, this would have been a better movie, honestly. And not for 2 hours and 45 minutes, by all means. So, yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a Best Picture movie. Yeah, not worth it. And did kind of piss me off a bit, especially just... Yeah, it's just one of the worst long movies out there. Not a bad film, but it's just like... Definitely not a Best Picture movie. I'm glad this movie did not win. It would have been one of the worst ones, honestly. Let's get into a brighter mood, though. Going into the best Wes Anderson movie, and everyone agrees with me on that, The Grand Budapest Hotel. You never thought that a black comedy murder mystery movie that was released back in March would end up doing so well, getting 9 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Picture. Almost won for Original Screenplay, if it wasn't for the Birdman swept. Yeah, easily The Grand Budapest Hotel, S tier, obviously. It is his best movie, regardless, and it was actually my first Wes Anderson movie, and I think that was a great start to it in general, instead of going by order of his filmography, because, I mean, this whole situation of being this, like, black comedy, murder mystery, prison escape movie, trying to figure out who murdered Madame D, it's just like, and who, like, was Gustav H the real person, and also obviously dealing with the secret will, and it's just like trying to figure out what's going on while this bounty hunter is killing people that is close to Madame D, and trying to get away with it. It's just like, especially ever since, like, Gustav H is almost kind of in love with everybody, as Dimitri, Adrian Brody's character, said that he's bisexual. I mean, the comedy is just fantastic. Ray Fiennes is so fantastic. I really wish he would have been up for Best Actor here. He would have been a great nomination there. But Gustav H is definitely one of the most memorable Wes Anderson characters, and I think that's probably one of the things. I think a lot of the characters in this movie are so memorable, especially the connection between Gustav H and Zero. Of all the scenes they have to go together, and even the scenes when are a little bit separate when Gustav is in prison. And then just, like, all the situations they had to go through, from not just the prison break, but also going through this monastery, like trying to get to a monastery by going through these several monks, and then this whole ski chase with Willem Dafoe's character, which is the Dimitri's bounty hunter, and then the whole climax of the hotel. I mean, and trying to figure this out. And I love the whole story structure that it's a book in a book, because obviously this is obviously the story of, is interesting is somebody reading a story about the author who wrote the book called The Grand Budapest Hotel, telling his story that he found out from a story from Gustav H. years later, years earlier. Like, it was Tom Wilkinson's the older author, and then Jude Law plays the younger version of the author. He met F. Murray Abraham, who plays the adult Zero, and then he tells his story as a lobby boy through Gustav H.'s perspective about this whole massive mystery, especially like the Boy with Apple painting is probably one of the best movie props I think in recent years. It's just like, it was specifically made for the movie, and I think it's definitely one of the most memorable movie props. Even though it's just a painting, it's still fantastic, like a great, like one of the best props I think, not just for a Wes Anderson movie, but in general. I would say the production design fantastic. I would have stayed in there for an entire vacation at that hotel. Although it would be changed completely different, but it would be a place I would definitely go to, and definitely an all-timer win for best production design. Costume design is great. The makeup and hairstyling is great, although I think Foxcatcher might have been my pick. Oh wait, I have yet to see Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, costume design, I can't say costume because I've not seen Maleficent, but definitely original score, which did give Alexander Desplat his first Oscar, although he did lose himself for our next movie that we'll go into. That's kind of funny, but yeah, his first Oscar, definitely deservingly so. It should have won for original screenplay, and Wes Anderson would have been my pick for best director, though. Yeah, easily his best film, and The Grand Budapest Hotel, along with Roma, which we'll go into the next part, and 12 Angry Men are actually my first films I got in the Criterion Collection, my first Blu-rays in general, and man, that Grand Budapest Hotel Criterion's a great start to collecting that, and that was one of the best experience I've had for a physical media Blu-ray in quite some time. And now we're into The Imitation Game by Morton Tildum, one of my mom's personal favorites. I am putting this one in. I'm putting this in C. I'm gonna put this in C. It's alright. I do like the concept. Like, obviously, this is a real story about the Enigma key strategy, and a guy named Alan Turing knows how to try to figure out specifically the massive secrets that are going on in the Nazis, and trying to figure out to break their codes and stuff like that each day. And the whole build-up trying to get their first one was fantastic. It's just that I think the performances and the editing kind of holds it back. I think the performances especially, because obviously Alan Turing is secretly gay, of course. Obviously, because if he did expose it, he would have gotten massive trouble, as we saw in the opening scene at an interrogation of where he's telling about his entire journey. And obviously his scenes with Joan Clark, not really that fantastic, and honestly, oddly enough, Keira Knightley would have been my personal pick for supporting actress in terms of the Oscar nominees, but not by much. I would have not nominated any of those nominations whatsoever. That was a weak supporting actress lineup. Yeah, it's just like, I think it's just the whole production design I think I do like, especially the whole build-up to cracking the codes. It's definitely some of my favorite scenes, but it's just like, outside of that, there's really nothing going on, other than Alan Turing his relationship with Joan and the entire team, and him being secretly gay, of course, in real life. Adapted screenplay, that would have not been my personal pick. I would have gone with another Best Picture nominee that we'll go into at the very end of this part. So yeah, it's definitely, although it's one of my mom's favorites, it's not really one of my favorites. Now we're into Selma by Ava DuVernay, and a movie that not really has gotten controversy for the film itself, but a lot of backlash from the Academy, specifically not recognizing this movie a lot, because this was one of the 2 years of the hashtag Oscar So White controversy, where all 20 acting nominees were white, and David Oyelowo did not get in for Best Actor for his performance as Martin Luther King Jr. And yeah, this is ironic that this is actually the first theatrical motion picture on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that's kind of shocking, to say the least. There might have been like some TV movies or other documentaries, but this is a legit first ever truly motion picture based on the life of Dr. King, and specifically the whole march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And definitely, I am putting this one in A tier as well. This is a movie that I really think has aged well. But it's also, ironically enough, a movie that kind of makes me angry. Not specifically at the film itself, but specifically at the real life villains, all the real racists. And George Wallace is easily, the governor of Alabama at the time, one of the legit, real evil Americans in history. I mean, oh my gosh, he is basically what Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott are today. Oh boy. Man, I wonder if those two got George Wallace's influence on them, because he's... Yeah, but that was all credit to Ava DuVernay's direction and Tim Roth's fantastic performance as George Wallace, bringing the villain aside. David Oyelowo's fantastic as Dr. King. I actually did saw this movie actually in my freshman year in high school. It was like a few months after the movie had came out and it was available on home media, and my ninth grade history teacher showed us the movie, and I think watched this twice. I think a second time was for watching all the 2014 movies, and then a third time watching them all again this decade. And yeah, this movie really has aged well. Although 12 Years a Slave I think is superior to Selma, but Selma is definitely one of the best movies regarding the civil rights movement, right up there next to Malcolm X. Yeah, so this movie definitely deserved that Best Picture nomination, but it really should have got a lot more. Ava DuVernay, I know a lot of people were hoping she would have been the first colored woman to be up for directing. That would have been great, but she would have not made it in my personal lineup, though. Original screenplay, obviously, the performances and the direction kind of have more of the standout. And the song Glory, definitely a great win, although I can't really say because I've yet to see Beyond the Lights or Glenn Campbell I'll Be Me or or Begin Again, specifically in context with the movie, though. But yeah, that Oscar performance was great from John Legend and Common. And yeah, a movie that I do think really needs to be watched today on why, once again, like 12 Years a Slave, why you should not be a racist. Now we're into The Theory of Everything from James Marsh, a documentary filmmaker known for the Oscar-winning 2008 documentary Man on Wire. This was his biopic on Stephen and Jane Hawking, and one of the more forgetful Best Picture nominees, and one of the most forgetful Best Actor winners, because Eddie Redmayne did win Best Actor for his portrayal of Stephen Hawking. And it's ironic, this movie about somebody suffering through ALS is kind of ironic, coming the same year as the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I think somebody in the YouTube comments went about Eddie Redmayne's Best Actor when somebody said somebody should have gotten a bucket of ice water and dumped on him, because Eddie Redmayne never participated in the Ice Bucket Challenge, although Stephen Hawking actually did in real life, although his family did the ice for him. But this is a very forgetful movie, and I'm going to probably put this in E. It's just that I think that it kind of goes in the typical romance story, since that's kind of the main focus between the relationship between Stephen and Jane Hawking. And obviously, I don't blame for the accuracy, but when it goes downhill, you know where things go. It's just like the relationship kind of goes a bit sour, and it just doesn't go well. It's very forgetful. I don't remember much. Yeah, it's not a really great Best Actor win. Felicity Jones, not a great, decent in the movie. Like, I had her as just a filler spot in my personal Best Actress lineup, but that was just because it was a very weak year. Like, actress was so weak throughout the 2010s, and now in this decade, in 2020s, they're more stronger because there's a lot more candidates to choose from. But yeah, this is definitely a movie I don't think would not make it a Best Picture nowadays. It's very forgetful. I almost keep thinking this is an Oscar bait Weinstein movie, but this is not. This is from Focus Features, so yeah, so this is almost like one of the few non-Weinstein Oscar bait movies, I think, in recent years. And our final film for 2014, and also the 100th Best Picture nominee of the 21st century, if you go by the Best Picture nomination announcement order in alphabetically, Whiplash from Damien Chazelle. And without a doubt, Double S tier, without a doubt. It is a true masterpiece. This would have been my personal pick for Best Picture of 2014. I mean, oh my gosh. I remembered when I saw this movie a couple of years ago, I was blown away by it, especially that ending. I mean, the ending basically explains why this movie's a masterpiece, but J.K. Simmons, Damien Chazelle's direction, oh my gosh. This movie would have been, it's a great win, like winning almost all the Oscars it would have been up for. Although I would have given the Grand Budapest Hotel film editing, Whiplash definitely had a great win for supporting actor and sound mixing. I would have given it for adapted screenplay, although many people are wondering why it was up for adapted when there was a short film that was made, although there's massive debate about that, because some people would put it in original. I would just put it in adapted just based on the Oscar rule, I guess. So, yeah, and it should have been up. Damien Chazelle should have been up for directing. The romance plot, just one of the shortest ones, I think. Just get away with it. Although there is that one little bit that comes into the ending nearing, but oh my gosh, that final scene, I think there's no explanation about it. And I almost thought when I was watching the Oscars that year, when Whiplash was dominating with the three categories it already won for supporting actor, then it won sound mixing, and then film editing. And we were not at an adapted screenplay yet. And when we were getting closer to that, I was thinking to myself, is Whiplash going to win adapted screenplay over The Imitation Game? And I was so ecstatic that if it did, it almost would have been a massive upset for Best Picture. It really definitely looked like it could have been an all-timer Best Picture winner if it did win adapted screenplay. It didn't, but that would have been almost in another scenario. What if scenario if that did happen? Whiplash definitely would have been an all-timer Best Picture winner, because that's just insane that it almost did. But the fact that it won 3 out of 5 Oscars is amazing that it managed to do so, even with Chazelle out for director. Miles Teller was not really in the conversation for Best Actor that year, but it's just like the whole drumming scenario and just like the whole music of the film and just the caravan finale. Oh my gosh, that just like that would be kind of almost the beginning and trend of why Chazelle's endings with Hit That, La La Land, and Babylon would be, although 2 out of the 3 did work. I have not seen his first film, though, so I can't really say, but definitely one of the all-timer Best Picture nominees. And this actually got Jason Blum his first Oscar nomination. He's also obviously notable for producing a lot of horror movies, and this is actually one of the few non-horror movies that he did hit produce, and it ended up benefiting from that. Because the buzz was just all because of J.K. Simmons' performance, and then the movie just came along with it, and many people loved it, and it now is a 3-time Oscar-winning movie. So definitely one of the best Picture nominees of this century so far.